Greetings, all. I'm Pittsburgh City Councilman Robert Daniel Lavelle,
And I'm Councilman Reverend Ricky Burgess.
and we welcome you back to Black Pittsburgh Matters. Black Pittsburgh Matters is a series of virtual town hall meetings affirming a citywide agenda that Black Pittsburgh does indeed matter. Black Pittsburgh Matters means Black Lives Matter. It means we must protect the health and safety of Black people. It means that Black communities matter. We must focus on rebuilding the Black communities. And it means that Black wealth matters. We must work on increasing Black employment and entrepreneurship.
The Black community has been disproportionately affected by twin crises, the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic crisis, and then race relations and police issues, which is a public health crisis. Normally in times of crisis and great change, we'll be coming to you as the Black elected officials of Pittsburgh and having meetings across the city with our constituents, partners, and allies. Since we can't do that safely in the current pandemic, we are now using this media and platform to come to you in the ways in which we can, to talk about what we're doing and discuss policy and legislation concerning Black Pittsburgh. These meetings will be available via Facebook, YouTube, and the city's cable channel. You can contact or ask questions even tonight via the Black Pittsburgh Matters Facebook page or email us at blackpghmatters, that's blackpghmatters@gmail.com. And today's town hall meeting topic is Black Pittsburgh Matters, Black elected officials update.
So, Reverend Burgess and I are two members of a larger group of governmental officials committed to building a better Black Pittsburgh. And that coalition is called the Black Pittsburgh Elected Officials Coalition. The PBEOC is comprised of 7 elected officials from the state, county, and city levels committed to a Pittsburgh where African Americans can thrive. While Reverend Burgess and I work on the city level, we coordinate with the PBOC from the county and state levels to realize our shared vision for Black Pittsburgh. As important as it is that we work together to ensure that we protect and uplift Black lives, Black communities, and Black wealth, it is even more important now that we work together in the midst of our current pandemic. This new monthly segment is dedicated to updates and conversations around what the PBOC has been doing, is currently doing, and are doing, and hope to accomplish for Black Pittsburgh. This will be a place where we can chat about the legislative process, the challenges and the solutions for Black Pittsburgh at the state, county, and city levels.
It's important these times of concurrent racial and COVID-19 public health crisis that we encourage Black political participation in the census and the upcoming elections. This month, a few of us, myself, Councilman Lavelle, Councilman DeWitt Walton, were able to personally meet with the presidential candidate, former Vice President Joe Biden, as he traveled through Pennsylvania. Along with the other councilmen, we talked about the importance of building up Black neighborhoods. This is an important reason why we're encouraging political engagement in our communities. It's important that we get the right people working to uplift our communities and ensure funding and representation equity from the federal government, as well as we exercise our hard-won rights this fall. To speak about Black Pittsburgh and Black political engagement this evening, we are honored to welcome the PBOC. We are joined by State Representative Jake Wheatley, State Representative Ed Gainey, County Councilwoman Olivia Bennett, and County Councilman DeWitt Walton. We welcome you to this evening's town hall meeting.
Thank you. Good evening.
So the first thing we wanted to do, as we mentioned, was give you all an opportunity to just provide legislative, or policy updates that the community may want to be aware of or should be aware of on all levels of government. So we'll start with Representative Wheatley. Is there anything happening in Harrisburg that your constituents or people in general should be aware of that's going on?
So first of all, I want to thank you and Councilman Burgess again for holding this forum and providing this opportunity for us to not only engage with you all, but to engage with the broader community about all of the things that we are trying to do on behalf of our constituents. As you all know, the state, like the federal government, is dealing with some real financial situations and We were currently, hopefully, we were trying to deal with some reforms to our election code to help counties, process our election in a safe, secure manner. But unfortunately, due to some unfortunate circumstances in the State House with one of our members contracting the COVID situation, we had to leave earlier than we could handle that situation. And so for us, the major issue outside of the election stuff, which I don't think we're going to be able to address, we still have this issue after November 3rd of how we deal with our state budget, which is projected to be somewhere close to a $5 billion hole. And, dealing with that, the ramifications, what that means to counties and what that means to cities, and what that means to constituent services that people come to depend on is a very important thing. Now, we probably could get through the rest of this fiscal year, which ends on June 30th, probably by borrowing money in the short term. What we really realize is we have about a $2 billion structural hole. We've been kicking the can down the road for many years. Now that COVID has kind of stripped it bare, we will have to figure out either we're going to come up with a combination of new revenues, cuts, or we're going to have to drastically rethink and reimagine what states can do to support, the core functions of government. And so I think that's the major thing that people are trying to grapple with and get their minds around. And if the federal government doesn't come through with another stimulus for states and cities, I don't know how we get out of here without massive cuts and massive tax increases. So, that's my wonderful introduction and welcome to you all tonight. So I appreciate you having me.
That's rough. County Councilman DeWitt or County Councilwoman Liv Bennett, you want to talk about what's happening at the county level?
Well, for the county, we just had a budget address by the county executive, and for the 18th out of 19 years, there will not be a millage increase. We are trying to be fiscally responsible and fund all of the programs that we view as needed. We will have formal budget hearings within the next several weeks where we will ultimately put together and pass a budget proposal for the county. We intend to try to find resources to fund a children's fund, which about 2 years ago, the taxpayers of Allegheny County rejected a tax increase to fund the children's fund. And we recognize that providing resources to address early childhood education, pre-K, and after-school programs really fundamentally addresses many of the challenges that our young adults, young children face on a daily basis. We're going to fund that. We're going to find the money to fund that one way or another. There are challenges, as State Representative Wheatley shared. There is a real stress on the budget, but we're going to find a way to fund the services. If I remember correctly, we are proposing about 1.2 billion for the operating budget, 980 million for a capital budget, and we anticipate that there will be pretty close to $2 billion for grant budgeting. That the grant budgets come from basically state and federal funds that the county receives. Dollars are critical to continuing the progress the county has made over the years. We've built our cash reserve up from $5 million over 8 years ago to close to a $50 million rainy day fund for the county. It is absolutely critical. Legislatively, there are some issues that are really confronting us all. We believe I personally believe that passing the Independent Police Review Board legislation is critical for our county to begin to address some of the inequities and some of the fundamental problems that we are confronted with on a daily basis, to make sure that there's accountability and responsibility by and from municipal police authorities. So while it's not the greatest of times, we have tons of work to do, and we're going to get it done.
Liv?
So to add to that, some of the legislatively speaking, some things that we have coming before council and actually in committee right now. We're actually meeting tomorrow about these things. We have paid sick leave in the Human and Health Services Committee, which has been a hot button topic for many folks. We also have Juneteenth being made a county holiday, as the city and state has already done. That will be discussed tomorrow in the Government and Reform Committee meeting, as well as what is kind of our version of the Crown Act, but it is actually amending current legislation to add the classification of hair as something that can't be discriminated against in the county. And we also introduced facial recognition, banning facial recognition in the county. That will be coming up in my committee probably after election. And also we will be talking about the Civilian Police Review Board in my committee after election as well.
You know, I guess we should at least talk about the city's fiscal outlook, right? Because we both know that the city is facing probably next year about an $80 million hole in the budget. And that although our mayor chose not to lay people off, even though we were losing income, and use our savings to pay them, moving into January without a stimulus directly from the federal government, it will be impossible for the city to meet its expenses without laying people off and or raising taxes.
Yes, you are correct. We're looking at about an $80 million shortfall next year. Over the next 5 years, we're projecting about 376 million shortfall over the next few years. We are also hoping that with the election of a new president, that there will hopefully be some stimulus dollars that come into the city. We're also hopeful that if the examples are like if the Steelers do well and can make it to the playoffs, that's additional revenue that can come in to helpfully not lay off individuals. Any position that is currently doesn't have someone in it, we probably will not be able to fill those positions moving forward. And as of right now, there is not the plan to lay off individuals, but we also have to be serious and potentially considering it. It also puts in jeopardy our capital budget, which means if we don't have projects that are already in the pipeline, then those projects are also really being threatened. Less paving and things of that nature. I think the interesting part, and also from a city legislative update, most of us were at a press event earlier today where we talked about the avenues of hope, which was we were targeting 5, or actually I think it's 6 business districts throughout the city that are predominantly African-American business districts to actually begin really investing in those business districts to bring them back to life. Which will be good for the city socially, economically, it's just, it's moral. But the question is, and this goes to even what Representative Wheatley had to say, was in a time where we're facing 80 million shortfall next year, in a time when the state, is looking at billions, how do we then take that budget and still make it equitable? How do we then take that budget and say, we're still going to prioritize avenues of hope and we're going to put the money in the budget in order to ensure that we're still funding those most in need. And I think that's going to become a very serious conversation over the next month or two. And I'm certainly curious to hear your thoughts or any of my colleagues, Representative Wheatley, Councilwoman Bennett, your thoughts on how to provide an equitable budget during the time of COVID.
So I'll tell you, as a chairman, as Democratic chairman of Finance Committee, one of the roles that I'm going to be tasked with is trying to figure out with my colleagues the revenue that's necessary to support the core functions of our state government. And certainly part of what that will entail is how do we support cities and municipalities and townships and boroughs? Because right now you're limited in your funding mechanisms and options, and so one of the things I've been trying to push my colleagues in the Finance Committee, especially on the other side, is for us to use this time of crises to really take a step back and reimagine our tax policies and ways to be more equitable, in ways to support the things that I think we all say we want to see it have, and to use it as a way to balance. For example, for years and years and years, there was a University of Pittsburgh professor, Dean Miller, who talked about coming up with a regional tax structure, a regional tax sharing plan, some way to share the burden of our region, because when we promote ourselves, we don't just promote ourselves as individual cities and townships, we promote ourselves as a region. And so with the successes of those regions, we should have a tax structure that shares, but our current, the way that we currently do the things that we do, we don't really make that easy, or it's not something that we kind of engage in. So I've been saying we should use this opportunity to really try to look at ways that we can come up with some creative, innovative things and how we can support each other, as well as lessen the burden on any one municipality or township or borough, because not all of us are created equal. And that's the same as it relates to our cities and townships. They're not all created equal. So anyway, long story short, I'm not sure if that's a winning argument. I'm not sure if that's something that's going to happen in time for your next year's budget. But I certainly think when we have crises, there are opportunities in crises, and all we really need is a political will to do things differently than we've done it before.
I'll take the, well, I saw Liv nodding, so I'll let her chime in, but I'll take this moment to also just advocate or lobby, Jake. As you know, the city is also limited in the manners in which we can tax. We don't have the same rights and abilities as Philadelphia. So we can't get as a city as creative as we would like to in terms of raising revenue, cutting costs, things of that nature. And so as you're working to sort of reimagine, having a conversation with us, and I'll put on the table just something as simple as the commuter tax, right? Like if we had a commuter tax here in the city, we could probably not very easily, but we could definitely plug our hole dramatically.
So, you have a commuter tax. It's just it's $50 per worker. As in Philadelphia, it's almost $2,000 per worker. It's different. But I'll also tell you, and this is what I've been saying this for 18 years, and I really believe this. If we want a regional tax plan, or we want to be able to have a more equitable tax sharing from our suburban neighbors, we need to offer a service that is critical, and that is a regional transportation system that gets people to and from where they need to go in an effective manner. And that will cost money. That will cost an investment, but long term, it will be the most best thing we could do for the future of this region, is to really create honest to goodness regional transportation system. So anyway, long story short, the reason that didn't happen though, when we first went to that, the reason why we only got $50 per worker was because the political, and I know we're not talking politics, but it's reality. The political strength had waned from the city to the suburbanites, and the Republicans had control of the process in Harrisburg. And because they were representing what they thought their constituents, they blocked us from having a real shared process and funding. And so they limited that. So if we want to change that, we want to have a real conversation about that, then we have to talk about what else are we offering to our suburban and rural friends that makes them see the shared reality of our working together and benefiting together.
The other tax that Jake, since we're talking about state, we'll get to county stuff and other stuff in a minute, is I have always been a fan of a payroll prep tax for nonprofits, especially for the large nonprofits, because it is a tax that they absolutely don't pay. It actually is passed on to their employees, and that every other business pays these payroll prep taxes, but the large nonprofits are exempt. And although that wouldn't plug our budget completely, that would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $8 to $15 million a year if the nonprofits have to pay that tax. So that's another loophole that I'd ask you to have your colleagues consider, is giving us the power to collect those resources.
And I will tell you, we have a better shot of doing all of these creative things if Jake Wheatley became the majority chairman of the finance committee versus being in the minority. So I'm just going to leave it as that.
And is that a possibility, do you think, in this season?
I think anything is possible. We see it even in our on our call right now. We have members who did the impossible when no one thought they could. So with voters, depending upon how voters respond, there is an opportunity for us. I think we need it nationally. If you're talking about being able to have compassion and equity in the way that we will make these decisions, then we need to have people who care about equity and compassion in the seats, because it's going to be a difficult next couple of years. And the people that you have in these majority parties that's sitting to make these determinations, you want them to reflect the things that you care about. So if enough voters say yes, we will have that.
So I want to, you mentioned politics and voting. That's a good segue to, I'll start with DeWitt. DeWitt, you have advocated and have been sort of you have been a strong advocate of making sure that our voting process is inclusive of the Black community as a council person. And then in your other hat, you have been on a nonpartisan basis, really reaching out to make sure that African Americans vote in this election. So could you talk a little bit about the county's process in voting, and then how important it is for us to exercise that our right to vote?
Well, thanks, Councilman Burgess. I want to quickly say that what we have done is, when the county decided that, or to take advantage of the early voting opportunities, we sat down and met with the administration and shared with them our concerns that it was critical that early voting opportunities would take place in strongly African American communities. After significant discussion, the administration agreed to our request that we place early voting sites in Homewood, in the Hill District, and on the north side. And so last weekend, we had early voting at the Homewood CCAC, and over 3,000 ballots were submitted at that site. Those are not polling places. Those are early voting sites. And so they're handled differently. This coming weekend, on Saturday from 9 to 5, Sunday from 11 to 7, there'll be opportunities for people to come and submit their ballots, their mail-in ballots, in person if they want to, and people can register to vote. If you're registering, you won't be able to vote that same day, but you'll be able to register and apply for a mail-in ballot that day. Next weekend, you will be able to do that at CCAC in Homewood. In Allegheny over on Ridge Avenue. Additionally, we have pulled together a broad-based coalition that is focused largely in Allegheny County and in the city, but it encompasses all the way to Erie to Uniontown on the south, and includes Mercer, Lawrence, Beaver, Washington counties as well. And so it is what we believe to be the largest coalition ever assembled to address Black voters in the history of Western PA. And I'm proud to say that both you and Councilman Lavelle are supportive of that effort. State Representative Wheatley is part of that coalition on a nonpartisan basis. And we are generating a ton of attention, a ton of energy and excitement. And we urge everybody to just vote, because as Jake just outlined, it is the electoral process that ultimately determines what our future will be. And I'd love to see Jake as the Democratic chair of the Finance Committee. We can then begin to address many of the challenges that we're confronted with in terms of funding programs here in the city of Pittsburgh, and tackle that that employee payroll tax that would fill a significant piece of that gap of funding for the city itself.
Olivia, talking about voting, as you know, you and some of your other colleagues have been very active in getting people to count the vote, so much so that you guys have an advertisement about the about putting your ballot in. I think the naked ballot campaign that was extremely impressive. And so, if you want to talk a little bit about, I'm curious. I was very impressed by it, and wonder how that came to be, and talk about. And you can even review, the importance of making sure your ballot goes into the security envelope. So talk about both things, the importance of the message, but then talk a little bit about how the campaign started, and kind of, for maybe people who haven't seen it, describe it to our viewers.
All right, so thanks. So yeah, I was actually a co-host on a voting education webinar with a bunch of partners across the state. PA Participate PA, PBEOC was a partner, Committee of 70, the PA State Election Department, or whatever that, I can't remember. But anyway, so there was a bunch of partners, and we did these calls every Wednesday. It was like a lunch and learn. And of course, I invited Bethany to come on, Councilwoman Hallam to come on. And as she's on the Board of Elections in Allegheny County. And so we were on the call, and Bethany goes, well, guys, I have this really crazy idea to save our democracy. How about getting naked to save our democracy? And I was like, I'm down. So literally, I think that happened on Wednesday. By Friday, we were shooting the photos. So very fast turnaround. But what was so urgent to us about it is that, one, that was not required in the primary. So it would be very confusing to folks to have something that was not true in the last election be true in this election. So, and then when that ruling came down from the PA Supreme Court, it was estimated that we would lose 100,000 ballots just because they were not placed into the secrecy envelope. And if you paid attention to the last election, the current president only won Pennsylvania by 44,000 votes. So losing 100,000 votes was very scary to us. So scary times call for desperate measures, right? So we got naked. And so the point of it was, just to really play out that naked ballot. They called it a naked ballot, so we just kind of played on it. And so we wanted to really, really show folks how to make sure that their vote was counted. So filling out the ballot, placing that ballot in the secrecy envelope that says official election envelope. That's all it says. Sealing that, and then putting that into the declaration envelope, filling out the declaration envelope with today's date, not your birth date, and submitting that to either mailing that or submitting it to a satellite site or down to the actual elections office downtown. So we just felt like it was very important, and good, bad, or ugly. I mean, we got trolled, we got adored. I mean, we had the whole gambit of reactions, but one thing for sure, nobody will forget not to send in a naked ballot.
It was indeed very effective. Would you also, Liv, I know you've been out there almost on a daily basis, to the best of my knowledge, actually also registering people to vote and helping them turn in their ballots. So if you could also talk a little bit about that and what people need to know about registration, when that ends, and whatnot.
Let me back up 1 second, because something is ending like today, and that is the census. They challenged the administration, the White House administration challenged the October 31st deadline. They won. So they now have permission to stop the census. So if you do not fill out the census today, you will not be counted. So that's the first deadline. Deadline to register to vote is the 19th, which is this coming Monday. I will be actually doing a voter engagement registration tomorrow in Three Rivers Manor in Spring Hill. I'll be doing one in Friday in Northview Heights. We've been doing them in the Mon Valley. We'll be doing Take Action Mon Valley. We'll be doing something in Braddock on Thursday, as well as, I can't remember the other location, McKeesport maybe. But yes, we are very, very much getting out there and trying to make sure that every single person is registered to vote, that we're engaging folks, that no one can say that they did not know that there was an election coming up and that they did not have the opportunity to participate. I've talked to folks who don't want to participate, and that's their decision, but I want to make sure that folks actually know. And the one that I'm doing tomorrow, somebody actually reached out to me today about, so I was like, sure, I got the material, let's do it. So yeah, I think it's very important to make sure that we are registering everybody to vote. The best way to get your numbers up in your engagement and your turnout is by engaging new voters. It's not just turning out the same people over and over again. It's actually activating and engaging and getting new folks involved. And that's how you increase your numbers, which had a little practice at during my campaign, since we upped our numbers in my district about by 20-something%. So that's kind of how we did it. And I'm just trying to duplicate that through this election, because I believe that this election is life or death. And so the 19th is your voter registration deadline, which is this Monday. And the 27th, October 27th, which is not this Tuesday, but the following Tuesday, is the deadline to fill out your mail-in ballot application. If you want a mail-in ballot and you have not requested it yet, you need to request it by October 27th. And you can also do these things on votespa.com. Everything is right there on that site. So if you have access to it, it's the easiest way to do all of these things that we're talking about.
And if I could, I want to elevate something Councilwoman Bennett just talked about. First, I want to focus in on some of the marginalized communities that are always a little uneasy about their status of if they can vote or not. And that is our returning citizens and those citizens who are maybe still housed in one of our facilities, but they have not been sentenced or they're awaiting trial. All of these folk can vote. And I'm happy to say that there's a real aggressive effort out this time around to focus on them and educate our returning citizens that they have power and they can vote. And if anyone has any questions or any concerns of being told that they can't vote because they may be on parole or probation, or they may be in one of our county facilities. And that's another thing that I have to give credit to DeWitt and the coalition, which Liv is also a member of, is they have, we've gotten videos in the Allegheny County Jail that's educating them. We have now Lawrence County has agreed to start running videos. I think Washington is one that is running videos. So letting people know, I know I talked to the Department of Corrections today. They're going to be sending out another missive to all the halfway houses, informing all of our citizens that they have the right to vote. The other thing I wanted to point out that Liv talked about that I'm stressing, the census is a very important activity. It was so important. It was something that was spoke about in our Constitution. And this is the same thing that looked at us as African Americans as 3/5. The purpose of them making us 3/5 was to count for power and representation. And so for all of our folk who are a little nervous or concerned about being counted or having the government understand the information, none of this stuff can be used outside of any purpose other than for the census. And if it is used, it is highly illegal, and that entity or that person would be subject to severe penalties. And so what I always tell people who say, I don't want to fill out that because I don't want the government to know what I'm doing. Guess what? If you're on any public assistance, they have all your information. If you are a person that's been in and out of any of our correctional institutions, whatever, they have all your information. If you're online, if you have a Facebook account, Twitter account, social media account, they got your information. If you got a mobile phone, they got your information. So running away from the census isn't keeping you off the grid. And so it's very important. What it's doing is preventing us from getting all of our resources for our children, our families, and our community that we deserve. And I think that's one of the things that we have to stress. So if they haven't filled out those forms, please fill out. And that's a reason why this administration is doing all they can to eliminate the full count of Black and brown communities. So it's very important for us to understand that and participate fully. So anyway, that's my soapbox.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I did give the website for voting, but I did not give the website for census. So census is my2020census.gov. Go to my2020census.gov. You got till tonight. If you don't do it by tonight, you're not going to get it. You're not going to be counted. And each person brings in about $2,100 per person per year for the next 10 years. So you do the math, and that is how much you're bringing just by your 5-10 minutes of completing that census.
So a lot of people in our communities feel as though nothing changes for Black people, whether they vote or not, right? They are very apathetic about voting. Maybe we'll start with DeWitt. What's on the ballot? Why? What significant changes will be, what difference will it make this year, especially if people vote or not?
What's not on the ballot? You know, funding for public education is on the ballot. A woman's right to choose is on the ballot. Worker rights, healthcare, all of those things that we hold near and dear and really don't pay a great deal of attention to are on the ballot. All of the issues that impact every piece of our daily lives is on the ballot. You know, everything that we work for legislatively can be ruled unconstitutional by the judiciary. So it is absolutely critical, if we want our voices to be heard, if we want our concerns addressed, we have to really vote so that people who are understanding and committed to our issues get elected. It's that simple. If you don't vote, then in a manner of speaking, you are voting against yourself. Either you're in and exercising your voice, or you are exercising the voice to be a victim, to be victimized. Everything that's important to all of our families and us individually are there on the ballot.
Rev, and you may want to talk more about it, but I think we'd be remiss if we didn't also remind everyone paying attention that there's also a referendum on the ballot this year that you helped push that, amongst other things, expands the Citizen Police Review Board powers to require the police to actually participate in the investigations which the police do not have to do now. So if you would like, you may want to talk more about that as well.
Yes, we are urging you to not just vote, but to participate in the referendum question. We want to strengthen the powers of our Civilian Police Review Board. Right now, we cannot compel police officers to participate. There's no penalty if they don't participate. So this referendum will make that part of their work agreement so they could be terminated for not participating. Second of all, it requires the mayor and the chief not to make final determinations before the Police Review Board makes its determination. And this is really important, not so much when an officer is fired, but rather when an officer is found not guilty or innocent. You want to have if they're accused of serious violations of civil rights, you want to have this body do their determination and have that part of the fact finding with the Office of Municipal Investigation. So the mayor and the police chief are making the determination with all of the facts on the table. And so that's in essence what the referendum does, and it changes the Home Rule Charter. We cannot directly change police policies as a council, but we can change the Home Rule Charter, which gives power to the Civilian Police Review Board. So we hope everyone will vote. I'm going to vote yes, of course, and I think it is being supported by the Police Civilian Review Board itself. And you've actually not heard a lot of pushback from the police department. These are common sense things that we need to do to strengthen our city's police oversight.
Hey, Rev, can I take a stab at what you asked earlier about the importance and what's on the ballot, though, because I feel really vested in this question, and it's because I did so poorly. I had a good friend who explained to me the reason why she's not voting in this election, and I tried to explain to her why I thought she should, and I did such a terrible job. I want a second chance at it. And really what it boils down to, and I don't blame people who've lived a life and hasn't seen what they thought the system should be doing for them, to feel frustrated and to feel, anti-participation anymore. Because if you try something, get your hopes built up. We got Obama elected and we thought the world stopped. But what we forget is, in a system like the one that we're currently in, just because you elect one person to it, there's a whole system that still operates, and one person can't change that whole thing, right? You have to have system change. So you have to have a group of people coming in and constantly approaching it. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because when I was growing up, it was after the 60s, and you had major revolutionary thinkers from the Black perspective who realized that we're not going to win a war on the streets shooting, right? The system will find a way to co-opt, murder, and control that. If you're really going to have permanent, sustained infiltration and disruption, you have to elect people to put them in place so they now become the power holders in that institution. That's why Malcolm talked about, until we control our institution, we will never be truly free, right? That's why the Black Panthers their whole system changed to trying to elect people who had a vision like they had. And these elections really come down to, no one is perfect. You're not going to find a perfect candidate unless you run, right? So if you want a perfect candidate, put yourself out there, start running. But right now in this election, we only have two choices from the top of the ticket, and we need to decide which one is better aligned with us and what we're trying to do. And what I'm saying to people who's on the fence, you can't win not playing, right? You got to pick a side. I don't care what that side is. You got to pick a side and roll, because otherwise you are never going to advance. Like, if you don't play the game, you never can win the game. So I would just keep advising people, voting will not solve all of our issues, but certainly sitting on the sideline, you have no chance to get any of your issues addressed.
Olivia, what you think?
I agree. I mean, I think I understand why people are very apathetic towards voting. I understand why folks just don't see the benefits because government is slow, change is slow. There's things that we want to get accomplished on my level of government that's taken some time. I mean, DeWitt's talking about the Civilian Police Review Board. He's been working at it longer than I have, and it's been in my committee for the last year. So I get it. But I also think that voting is one tool. And we have to use all of our tools in our arsenal. Is it the end all be all? Absolutely not. But is it one way that we can start going about to seek equity and to get people who are aligned with our vision, like Representative Wheatley just said? Like, it's going to take all of that. It's going to take folks pushing from all different levels. This system was not created singularly focused. It's multidimensional, so it's going to take multiple approaches to dismantle it, and voting is one of those approaches.
So I want to bring Micah in to, she's been monitoring the questions that people are posting live, but as she comes in, Liv, one of the tools that we also have is activism. You have been very much one of both the activists and the politician, and you've been a part of the activists. Where do you see that movement going from here? How do we keep the activism alive and well? Because that activism in many ways is what we're now resulting in avenues of hope, is how we've been able to do the police reform agenda that we've been able to move, because they have been active, and we've then been able to move legislation as one tool, but they work hand in hand. So I'm just curious to see where you see activism moving forward during these times, and then how can we stay engaged?
Yeah, I kind of look at activism, especially direct actions or protesting, as kind of the entry level position for this type of work. Like, it's an easy way in. It's an easy way to start connecting with folks that have the same ideologies, same beliefs, same overarching goals, and then you can kind of figure out your lane from there. And so I don't think that activism in itself is going anywhere, because people are getting activated almost every day. We have folks that, we have young folks that are learning about these things, and really that's the bulk of our activists are the young people. So as they start churning and activating each other, I think it's just going to be a movement that continues on. And I hope it does. My greatest fear is that we get rid of this dumpster fire of an administration, and that people kind of go back into their comfortability and they don't stay activated. Just because we elect a Democratic president, if that happens, doesn't mean that the work stops there. There's still things that we have to be pushing for. I mean, the president isn't about defunding. There's a lot of things that are coming out of the streets that this president has adamantly, or this vice president has adamantly said that he's not for. So this work doesn't stop once we get Trump out of office, praying that happens. It continues. So that's where that activism still comes in and is able to be utilized. Because I think that what happened and how we got here is that we became very complacent, and I'm hoping that does not happen again. And I know that I will do everything possible to keep folks active and making sure we're pushing things forward, and demanding and holding whoever is in office accountable. Because just because that person has the same party affiliation as you do doesn't mean that they're all aligned with everything you're aligned with, and some things you're still going to have to push for. So that's where I see activism going, and how we can continue that projection of the street informing what we're doing as far as policy, and getting folks that actually are willing to listen to the people in the street and make those changes.
And before you go to Mike, Olivia, one of the things, and I'm curious for your answer to this question. One of the things I think is that those of us who are legislators, we're all part of a bigger body. And that bigger body, whether you're in the state, whether you're in city council or county council, the majority culture has the majority of votes in all of our in all of our sessions, right? In the State House, State Senate, County Council, City Council. And I think sometimes people, not necessarily activists, but people who don't know government, expect us to be able to unilaterally make change. And so my question really then, this, as kind of a new legislator coming from the activist background and the street background that you come from, have you been surprised about how the actual internal workings of government, how it works? Has anything surprised you about it?
I don't think surprise. No, I don't think surprise would be the word. I understood. I understood it, and I think for my specific body, I understood how very conservative that body is. So even though we have a lot of, and that was really the idea of folks like myself and Councilwoman Hallam running in the first place, was to make our body a little bit more progressive, because they, folks supported other folks who ran for office previous to us, and they were kind of island on their own in progressive land. So that was the whole point of rising folks, me and Councilwoman Hallam, to run for these seats in the first place, is because of that. So if that was the purpose of running us for these seats, then that kind of, spells out the atmosphere on at least my body. And I didn't expect that things were going to all of a sudden be, people were going to be voting for Medicare for all, or, these very progressive ideas, because I just knew what I was up against. But to your point, I think that you're right, that folks do kind of, oh, well, Liv Bennett's there, she'll get it done, not understanding exactly that you need 8 votes to get things done. And I also think that they folks put a lot of weight, and I don't know how to navigate this yet, but it's like, why are you, I support you, I support this vision, I support this cause. There's 13 other people on this council that don't. So why are you like hounding me? Why don't you go hound those 13 other people? So I think that's where education comes in, because with education, then you can better strategize on your approach. But you can't have a good strategy if you don't have good information.
Thank you. Micah, if you're with us, if you could turn on your camera.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Our first question was talking a little bit about the Stop the Violence Fund budget. So I think there was just a desire for some discussion and some understanding about how that works.
You take a crack at it, Dan?
Sure. So I actually had a meeting today where I learned what that figure is going to be for next year. So for those who aren't aware, let me take a step backwards. We passed legislation that it's 5% this year, correct, Rev?
Yep.
That would allocate 5% of the police budget to a Stop the Violence Fund. Again, as a way, based upon all the requests and protests that we were seeing, that people want to see less police, but more social service, more actual initiatives that will get ahead of the police needing to show up. It looks like that number is going to be a little north of $6 million this year. That will actually be transferred. It'll be budgeted as an expense from the police department that will then go into a special trust fund that actually has now been created, where we will then be able to utilize those dollars for early initiatives within the community to get ahead of the violence, to get ahead of crisis prevention work. So that's the actual number that we'll have this year, and then that number over time will grow as the amount eventually escalates up to 10% of the police budget. But Rev, if you want to add a little more context.
Yeah, one of the things that you and I both know, that the Group Violence Initiative, formerly called the Pittsburgh Initiative to Reduce Crime, has significantly reduced homicides in the city of Pittsburgh, but it's done so on a shoestring budget. We have young men who are some of them informally incarcerated, who have turned their lives around, who have street credibility, who are now de-escalating situations, but they're doing this on a part-time basis. And imagine, they've done so much great work on a part-time basis. Imagine if they're able to do this on a full-time basis, right? And be available at any time. And so the Stop the Violence Fund was designed to fund innovative programs. That's just one. I think another program that's really important is to embed social workers into in with police stops, because what we know, and I think on Erica, Councilwoman Erica Strasburger, I believe on her Facebook page, or at least on her council page, she has data on why the police are called. Most of the calls are not, even though you may have seen a commercial by Donald Trump, most calls are not violent calls. They're not, they're not calls for violent crime at all. And they are things that could be handled by non-uniformed and non-armed civilians. And so we need to, we send police officers because that's all we have. And so we need to find other vehicles in order to meet the needs of people, so we're not asking the police to do things they were not trained to do in the first place. So that's what the Stop the Violence Fund is designed to do, is to invest in these innovative social programming that will deter the use of police and hopefully reduce crime.
Thank you. I think we had a few more. A little bit about sort of job opportunities and creation in Pittsburgh. Maybe I'll direct that to County Councilman Walton with your work with the Philip Randall Institute.
Yeah, that's a really great segue, because there's a direct correlation between income and aberrant activity. The Pittsburgh A. Philip Randolph Institute has been working for over a dozen years to identify, recruit, and train individuals from underserved, underrepresented, and the previously incarcerated communities, to help them build the kind of requisite skills to have family-sustaining jobs or careers. And we conduct workforce development training. We do 4 cohorts of what our core Breaking the Chains of Poverty program on an annual basis. And we just started a healthcare initiative in partnership with the CVS Corporation, where we are training individuals to become pharmacy technicians to work in pharmacies. You can call the A. Philip Randolph Institute at 412-562-2432 and ask for Felicia Williams. And she is prepared to engage individuals in conversations about how people can enroll in our pharmacy tech program, and as well our core workforce development that prepares people for careers in construction, manufacturing, and the emerging energy sector. We are building partnerships on a daily basis to transform people's lives. There are employment opportunities, and to that end, the CVS Corporation is, over the next 2 months, are going to hire 273 individuals to work as call center representatives. And many of these positions will be work from home. If you meet the requirements, the CVS requirements, CVS, after the interview and you're hired, CVS will place a computer in your home. They will pay for a phone line, and they will pay for an internet connection, and you work from home. So again, those opportunities are available. You should give us a call at 412-562-2432. There are 200 pharmacy tech positions that will be filled over the next year. So again, those are solid family sustaining careers. Pharmacy techs will start at $15 an hour and go all the way up to $27 an hour. Call center positions will be starting at $16 an hour. And so those are family sustaining occupations. We urge everybody that's interested, that is committed to transforming their lives, to take advantage of those opportunities. We are also working with Partners for Work and Career Links to identify, again, positions in manufacturing, in the construction and building trades, and we're working out a partnership with the Duquesne Light Company to place folk in energy auditing and lineman positions, and in that industry as well. So there are significant opportunities, but folks have to understand on the front side that you have to be committed to transforming your life and doing some things differently. Many of our residents believe, rightly, wrongly, or indifferently, that it is socially and legally acceptable to use marijuana or other drugs. Though all of these positions that we outlined require people to live a drug-free life, and you will be drug tested to get into those programs and that employment, and you subject yourself to random drug testing post-employment. So again, I'm not trying to take a moral position. I'm just saying that that's where we are, and those are those employers' requirements, and we don't have the ability to change that. But we do have the ability to help people gain family-sustaining employment. We hope that many of our listeners will take advantage of it. We encourage you to do so.
Thank you so much. Employment has been a major topic of discussion in town hall comment sections, and I've put the A. Philip Randolph Institute information in the comments. Similarly, we've had a few questions about how the PBOC is prioritizing hiring minorities for economic development projects, as well as when the yearly city report released on contracts given to minority and women-owned businesses is coming out.
And relative to the city implication, I think Councilman Burgess and Lavelle may be better prepared to answer that portion of it. But the PBOC has established a task force that works with Partners for Work on the local workforce investment board to begin to address a host of inequities and trying to resolve a number of those challenges and issues that confront our community specifically. They are we're trying to work on issues such as transportation. And we've had conversations with the business community to talk about equity in employment, and also contracting with vendors to try to build metrics where those numbers can be measured and improved on an annual basis. And let me share something with you that the county is doing. The county had a department, the Minority, Women, and Disadvantaged Business Department. That department is undergoing a national search for a director. And as soon as that director is hired, several significant changes are going to take place. There will be project managers assigned to the county's purchasing department. There will be a project manager assigned to the economic development department. And there will be a project manager assigned to the diversity and inclusion department. And each of those individuals will be tasked with specific responsibility to dramatically increase the level of investment and contracts given to minority vendors and specifically in the purchasing department to increase vending opportunities for county goods and services. So there are some good things on the horizon, and we have to continue to apply pressure to engage in those discussions so that we can measure, we can benchmark where we are and build increased opportunities as we continue to move forward. The county, in their, as I shared earlier, in their operating budget, is going to spend about $1.2 billion. On capital projects, they're going to spend almost $980 million. There is no reason that those numbers for minority vendors of goods and services and products can't be improved, and those dollars stay at home in African American communities.
One of the things that, and this is a different question, I have advocated, Councilman Lavelle and I have advocated for Black participation in all sorts of city contracts in terms of the authorities. The Housing Authority, which I sit as a commissioner, has one of the highest rates of women and minority participation in their contracts. All those things we've done. But one of the things that at the end of the day, our region is actually growing jobs. The problem is twofold. One, some of our workforce do not have the training they need in order to get these jobs. And two, as I think Jake was talking about, transportation. They don't have a vehicle to get to them. And so we have to do, I think, a better job of making sure our workforce is adequately trained for these 21st century jobs. The steel mills are gone. You know, my father, my uncle, my cousins all worked in the mills. Those days are gone. It's going to take a more skilled workforce to compete in today's environment, and then a world-class transportation system to get them to the suburbs where those jobs are at.
So Rev, I'm glad you brought that up. I was just recently talking to the new PRA, the Regional Alliance guy, and he was saying to me, yeah, we're seeing job growth, but when you compare to our competitive regions, it's not as large of a growth as others are. And primarily it's predicated on what you just said, because when I asked them what are the things that are preventing companies from kind of locating here, they talk about the talent, having the necessary talent. That gets into a whole infrastructure conversation around education and how we grow that talent, how we're matching that talent to what's happening. But I'll flip it and say part of our challenge here, and I think this is part of the work of the PBEOC, is how do we create a situation where we're not just talking about jobs for today, but we're talking about the vision for tomorrow. And we're not just talking about people being employees, but we're talking about people being the entrepreneurs who are creating the jobs, who are creating the space, because we have to talk about wealth. And Daniel always talks about this issue of wealth creation. And if we're going to ever kind of equal out some of this years and years of generational wealth that others have as a starting point versus where we are, we really have to be creative in how we do it. And so I'm committed. I think one of the questions was, kind of what we're doing to try to build that. And it's not just about getting them access to contracts, although that's important. It's not just getting them family sustaining wage jobs, but although that's important, we also have to kind of address that there were policies that's put into place that put us at a disadvantage and institutionalize that disadvantage to the benefit of others. It's our job to correct that now. And all of the folk who are on council with you, all of the people who are in the house with me or on county council with Liv and DeWitt, it's not just the Black electeds' responsibility, it's all of our responsibility to try to recognize that, and we have to put policy in place. And I'm gonna use this and then shut up. The fact of the matter is, every child that's born is born from communities of color, especially African Americans or brown, we need to have an investment strategy where we're investing in them so that when they get to 18 or 20, they can use that investment to either purchase a house or to maybe invest in their first business opportunity. And that's a way to get at the generational disadvantages that was built into our system. If we're talking about businesses like the access to capital, that's one part of it, but not just access to capital, but access to capital in the way and manners for which that business needs it. Because sometimes the rules are set up and say, yo, we have the access to capital, but the way you have it, I can't access it. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, long story short, it's our job and it's all those who say they are allies or that they say they want to do or be equitable. It's our job to look at those structures and policies that have been baked into our system that automatically creates a disadvantage, even though when you say everybody has the same access to this program. So anyway.
I want to if I can put my other hat on for a minute, Micah, and talk about education. The reason that I have spent 30 years in the community college system is because if you're African American and live in Allegheny County, 40 to 50%, I think it's at least 40% to 50% of every African American who goes to college at some point or another goes to Community College of Allegheny County. It is the largest single higher education institution for Black people in Allegheny County. And whether or not you get a degree or training, we know that our high schools are failing our children. And this is not just true, believe it or not, it's not just true in inner city schools, it's true in school districts across the county. Almost 50 to 60% of every graduate who goes into Allegheny County, regardless of their community college, from the county, regardless of their school district, comes needing some remedial classes. And so one of the things I think we have to do is really emphasize in our young people that they need a baseline, they need baseline skills. For DeWitt, for you to get through DeWitt's program, you still need some basic reading skills, you need some basic writing skills, you need some basic English skills. You also need the soft skills in terms of getting up on time, staying drug-free, say yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, being able to be appropriate on the workplace. And so I think we need to really double down on getting our young people, really all workforce, but in particular our young people, to get them the educational skills, both the hard skills and soft skills they need to be able to compete in this new environment.
If I may, and I know we're fast running out of time, but Rev and Jake, both of you are spot on because again, there's a direct correlation between education and income. And that's one of the things that we love about our workforce development program at the A. Philip Randolph Institute, because those are the things that you outlined, Rev, are all those things that we do in our workforce development program. But it is also critical that we look at this holistically, because we have to, and that's why, let me back up a step. That's why the Children's Fund becomes so critically important. Early childhood education, pre-K, after-school programs, where you get an opportunity to build those foundational kinds of skills so a young person can succeed. Because if they've fallen behind by the third grade, it becomes almost impossible for them to catch up later on in the education cycle. So we have to invest in our children. We have to make certain that they have all of the resources needed to have a legitimate chance to succeed. And so it talks about how we allocate our resources across the board to address those inequities that our community is confronted with. And lastly, it is not confined to the African American community. It is across our
our city, our county, our state, and our nation. We have to do better with funding education and make sure that people have a legitimate opportunity to succeed.
So with that being said, I want to put a pin in it. DeWitt is right. We've gone close to 20 minutes over, but that's okay because the conversation was worthwhile. But what I would like to do is when we come back together in a month, maybe we can center a lot of the conversation around what Representative Wheatley started talking about, which is the support for the small businesses, as well as the workforce, because hopefully within a month, I'll have more positive news regarding trying to do all of that on the Lower Hill District site. We are working on creating a first source hiring center and some other things. So hopefully we'll have some better news then. With that being said, I do want to just remind everyone to please vote and vote early. If you would like to do so this weekend, you can do so at the satellite location in the Hill from Saturday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and on Sunday from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the Shop and Save parking lot. Come out, come vote, please get engaged. With that being said, I want to thank everyone for joining us for today's show. I want to thank State Representative Jake Wheatley, County Councilwoman Olivia Bennett, and County Councilman DeWitt Walton. I want to thank you for all you all's work. I also just put a plug in, go ahead and vote for Jake Wheatley again as well. Also, and then lastly, just sort of emphasizing that in order for us to have a significant investment in the Black community, it is imperative that we continue to do our work collectively and together. And I just want everyone out there to know that we are all collectively committed to rebuilding Black communities in Pittsburgh for Black people, by Black people, in coordination with our partners and allies.
I also want to thank all of you who are watching and participating online in this town hall meeting. Remember, you can watch this show on Facebook, the city's YouTube channel, or the city's cable channel. A new meeting will occur every Wednesday. By working together, united in purpose, we can transform our city, strengthening it for all of its residents. Pittsburgh can only be a city for all when it becomes a city where Black Pittsburgh matters. Good evening, stay safe, and be blessed.